Good day, refiners.
As I watched Severance, the one question that kept coming back to me was, why do most of us hate our jobs so much? Why does it, at least initially in the first season, seem so appealing to sever your work self from your out self? So, as is usual for me, I was looking for the best way to describe the innies in the show, and then I found the answer, where I always find my answers, in my religious texts. And here it goes, and I quote, "He does not count the labor itself as a part of his life. It is rather a sacrifice of his life. It is a commodity that he has auctioned off to another. The final product of his work, therefore, is not his. What he produces for himself is not the silk that he weaves, certainly not the palaces that he builds. What he produces for himself is wages. And the silk and the palace are resolved for him into perhaps a cotton jacket, into copper coins, and into a basement home. Life for him begins where his work activity ends, at the table, at the bar, in the bed. The 12 hours of work, on the other hand, has no meaning for him, but only as earnings, which enable him to sit down at a table, to take his seat in the bar, and to lie down in a bed." You might be wondering where I found such a spot-on description of the Severance innies. Well, it comes straight from the page-turner, Wage, Labor and Capital, by none other than the rock star of revolutionary thought and my prophet, Karl Marx. Marx is laying it out about wage labor under capitalism in his book. Just as Marx explains, a worker's labor is nothing more than a transaction, stripped of any real value and reduced to just a way to earn enough to survive. The innies in the show, or rather the outies as innies, literally give up pieces of themselves to keep the machine running at Lumon Industries. Their work, isolated from any real life outside, becomes just another commodity, measured not by creativity or fulfillment, but purely by the paycheck it produces. This split, this deep alienation, reveals the raw dark core of capitalist exploitation, a theme that Severance brings into sharp, unsettling focus. So, if you had the chance, would you really choose to sever parts of yourself just to make it through the workday? Severance asks that question head on, turning the psychological and existential pain of our work lives into something almost tangible. The process of splitting an employee's work self, innie, from their personal self, outie, creates the ideal worker, obedient, void of personal dreams, and trapped in a never-ending grind. But it also uncovers capitalism's biggest lie, that our lives are truly our own, when, in reality, they are rented out to companies that decide not just what we do, but who we can be. At its core, Severance is a cautionary tale about how work doesn't just steal our time, it takes our identity. This piece digs into the deep question the show poses, from turning the self into a commodity to the blind worship of corporate loyalty, from the trap of false consciousness to the hope of rebellion. In the end, Severance makes us ask ourselves, just how much of our true selves have we already sacrificed just to get by under the system of capitalism?
By reaching 75% refinement on Sienna, you have earned for you and your fellow refiners a 5-minute music dance experience.
Part 1. The Commodification of Labor from Industrial Revolution to Lumon Industries. Before industrial times, work was a natural part of life. In small farming or gardening communities, work was all about surviving. Nothing fancy, just the daily grind dictated by nature's rhythms. There was no split between your work self and your personal self. Everything meshed together because production was about meeting the immediate needs, not padding a profit margin. Then came the Industrial Revolution, and suddenly work became this regimented, clock-watching affair. Factories forced workers to hand over control of their bodies and time, splitting life into work and home. 8-8-8, 8 hours of work, 8 hours of leisure activity, and 8 hours of sleep. This big divide is where Marx's idea of alienation was born, a split that Severance takes to a whole new, nightmarish level. See, Capitalism runs on one big lie, that your work is a fair trade of your time for some cash. Severance takes that lie and cranks it up. Lumon Industries isn't just buying your time, it's essentially turning you into a worker robot, without any say in the matter. The innies are there just to work, completely stripped of any past, future, or sense of self beyond their corporate role. In his work, Economic and Philosophic Manuscripts of 1844, also known as the Paris Manuscripts, written before Das Kapital, Marx talked about 4 types of alienation: being separated from what you make, being separated from your own human essence and from other people. And Lumon Industries nails all of them with the innies. Alienation from the process. Their work, like macrodata refinement, is stripped of any real meaning to them. Well, there is a meaning attached, but at the beginning it's just endless repetitive task. Alienation from the product. They work without any clue about what their efforts actually produce, much like factory workers who have no connection to the goods they create. Alienation from their essence. Denied any creativity or sense of purpose, the innies are brainwashed into following Lumon's cult-like rules. Think about the Keir's principles. So their humanity gets replaced by corporate doctrine. Alienation from others. With constant surveillance and isolation, any sense of solidarity is shattered, mirroring how capitalism breaks down real community ties. In fact, innies who do not really know who they are. We do not even know of their last names as innies. What better example of alienation from others could there be? What better example of alienation from their essence could there be? What better example of alienation from the process and the product could there be? Severance even takes Marx's idea of commodity fetishism, and turns it on its head by making the innies themselves commodities. Under capitalism, labor gets treated like any other product, and its human roots get erased. At Lumon, the innies aren't just workers, they're literally turned into disposable parts of a machine. The bizarre waffle parties and weird corporate rituals in the show, which feel like something straight out of a Kafka novel, drive home just how dehumanized these workers have become, as they're pacified with absurd rewards that mock the idea of genuine incentives. This is capitalism's darkest trick. By fragmenting workers so completely, the innies have no way to rise up against the system. Think anti-unionizing, all of it that happens around us in India or abroad. Workers split not only from their labor but from their very selves. Lumon's severance procedure is the living, breathing embodiment of Marx's warning. Once labor is alienated, the worker becomes a mere appendage of the machine. When you trace this split back from the wholeness of pre-industrial farming to the fragmented time-starved existence of factory work, you see the core contradiction of capitalism. It requires you to lose your sense of self just to keep the system going. The innie's plight isn't just some over-the-top sci-fi exaggeration. It's a hyperbolic mirror of today's gig economy, where precarious jobs and algorithm-driven management make us all a little less human. To break free from this cycle, the show hints we need more than just a nostalgic nod to simpler times. It calls for a radical reunification of our fractured selves, both individually and collectively. Lumon sums up the capitalist dream, a workforce so controlled that rebellion isn't even a thought. The severance procedure promises a kind of freedom for the outie, the self that escapes the grind, while turning the innie into a disposable worker. Outies believe they are liberated from the shackles of wage slavery, but really their freedom is built on a system that creates and exploits a slave class. Workers trapped in endless toil, stripped of memory, rights, and hope. Severance perhaps has achieved to showcase the highest form of slavery, where we slave and kill a part of our own conscious self. The innie isn't just another worker, they are treated like property. Unlike traditional workers who might have a chance to unionize or rise up, innies are so utterly alienated they don't even know they are being exploited. Their labor just turns into capital for the outie, who then feeds that money back into the system that keeps workers suffering under wraps. This cycle is a lot like what we see in today's world, from gig jobs with zero benefits to offshore sweatshops where the pain of the worker is invisible to the consumer. Meanwhile, the outie spending only strengthens Lumon's hold, funding tech that tightens the screw on worker freedom, creating a vicious cycle of oppression that makes collective action nearly impossible.
You may choose one genre and one accessory.
I choose Defiant Jazz.
Part 2. The Erosion of Identity. Work as Existential Theft. German philosopher Hegel had this idea about a master-slave power struggle, where one person, the master, controls another, the slave. But ironically, the master needs the slave to stay in power. Over time, the slave actually becomes stronger because they do the real work, while the master gets lazy and dependent. Philosopher Byung-Chul Han says modern work does not need bosses whipping us up. We exploit ourselves. We are always on, always hustling, thinking if I just work harder, I'll be free. But instead, we burn out. Hegel tells us power is an illusion. Workers could overthrow the system if they unite. Byung-Chul Han warns us we are killing ourselves trying to succeed. Severance combines both. The innies are both slaves and self-exploiting burnout victims. The real tragedy, even though these innies are built to be nothing more than work machines, they are still human. They make friends, dream about love, and feel real pain. Look at Adam Scott's Mark. He ends up mourning his wife twice. His innie falls for Helly R, while his outie grieves the woman he thinks is dead. She's not, spoiler alert. Irving B deals with an impossible romance, and Dylan G longs for a life he only catches glimpses of. It Never Let Me Go, a haunting novel by Kazuo Ishiguro, there's a quiet, devastating moment when the clones at Hail Sham School secretly create art, drawings, poems, sculptures, hoping their creativity might prove they have souls. But later, the crushing truth arrives. No matter how beautiful their art is, it won't save them. They'll still be wheeled into operating rooms, organs harvested, lives discarded. Yet, in those fragile sketches and clumsy clay figures, they scream, I was here, I mattered. Now cut to Severance, specifically Peg Kincaid, the Lumon employee who smuggles out a note, the Lexington Letter, exposing the company's horrors before killing herself. Her act isn't just rebellion, it's a proof that innies are more than office drones. Like the clone's art, Peg's letter is a flare shot into the darkness. I existed and I refuse to be erased. Later, when Helly's innie records a message to her outie, she says, I'm a person and you are not. It's the same raw human defiance. She's not just fighting Lumon, she's clawing back her right to be real, just like Tommy and Kathy clinging to their art in Never Let Me Go. So, what's the bare minimum of humanity we are willing to grant someone before calling them disposable? The clones make art, the innies send messages. Both are saying, if you won't free me, at least admit I'm alive. And that's the real horror. We live in a world that turns people into functions. Workers, donors, consumers, then act shocked when they beg, but what about me? What about my humanity? The tragedy isn't that the innies in Severance or clones in Never Let Me Go rebel. It's that, why don't we? To really heal, we must first face the lies that split us apart. The myth that only a select few are special. The false idea that hard work alone leads to escape. And the dangerous belief that freedom can never exist without real justice.
Though this experience is in Helly's honor, I urge all the refiners to take advantage of the opportunity presented.
Part 3. The Corporate Cult. Worship the CEO God. At Lumon, employees are groomed to worship Keir Egan. The perpetuity wing, crammed with relics of his life, practically functions like a shrine. Keir Egan's deification is a nod to how today's tech titans, think of Elon Musk or Zuckerberg, are often seen as visionary gods rather than plain old profit-driven executives. This sacralization makes it easier to justify exploitation. If the CEO is a prophet, then burning the midnight oil becomes a sacred duty. And any questioning of that is nothing short of hearsay. The perpetuity wing, with its carefully curated mementos of Keir's life, is the corporate equivalent of Apple's Steve Jobs theater or Salesforce's Ohana culture. Their history is mythologized to justify the present. Severance lays bare the creepy alliance between corporate power and quasi-religious indoctrination, showing how capitalism exploits our deep need to belong to make us toe the line. Lumon's almost fanatical devotion to Keir, complete with catchy slogans like Defiant Jazz, shrine-like relic rooms, and even the ridiculously infantilizing waffle party, is a modern twist on old-school tactics. Remember the 19th century industrialists like George Pullman. His model town kept workers in check with controlled housing and moral rules. And Henry Ford even had a sociological department that dictated everything from savings habit to who you should marry, all in the names of uplifting the working class. Lumon's gear worship echoes those same moves, mixing corporate interest with a fake sense of divine order, where the boss is both the benefactor and the deity. Lumon's bizarre rituals tap into what Emile Durkheim called collective effervescence, basically the surge of energy from shared rituals. But here, that energy is weaponized. The waffle party is not about real camaraderie. It is a cheesy stand-in for genuine solidarity, like those forced corporate retreats that pretend to bring people together, and then there's Max Weber's iron cage of rationality. Gear's odd teachings, a child's first breath is sacred but so is its last, sounds a lot like empty mission statements where the lofty ideals of progress are twisted into tools of control. Lumon's ever-watchful eye, via trackers, sensors, and Milchick's unnerving stare, brings to life Michael Foucault's panopticon, where the mere threat of being watched keeps everyone in line. The innies, much like, say, Amazon warehouse workers or any gig laborers, end up internalizing this constant surveillance, so much so that rebellion becomes almost unthinkable. The endless scripted breakroom penitence is like a mini psychological boot camp, conditioning workers to equate obedience with survival. This is a perfect example of what Arlie Hochschild calls emotional labor, managing your feelings to fit market demands. In the break room, dissenters are practically forced into apologetic rituals, as if breaking down their very selves is the only way to fit in the company mold.
He broke the skin.
He needs a full tetanus toxoid panel.
You've done it now, Dylan. I'm reporting this to Miss Cobell.
Yeah, you want to go see her together?
In Severance, challenging Keir isn't just frowned upon, it's practically sacrilege. And in our own world, questioning corporate loyalty often gets the same skeptical treatment. The message is clear. It's not enough to just work. You're expected to believe in the system too, like a cult. At its core, Severance is a mirror reflecting back at us. Most of us have in one way or another split ourselves into bits for the sake of our jobs, toning down our passions, stifling our frustrations, and even faking enthusiasm. The way most of our work is engineered into a precise machine-like process, so typical of capitalist rigor, ends up breaking us apart, reducing our rich, messy humanity to a disposable profit-making cog in the corporate machine. It's the end result of a long history, a slow slide from the hands-on control of the 19th century industrial bosses to today's worship of corporate demigods. Look at the many layoffs around you. The machinery of capital turns our vibrant human potential into nothing more than a line item on a balance sheet. So here we are, at a crossroad. On one side, a downward spiral into robotic conformity, on the other, a chance to piece back together our fractured selves and reclaim our human dignity. We have to ask ourselves the tough questions and own up to our part in this madness. Only by joining together and rediscovering our shared humanity can we hope to tear down these oppressive structures. And while we are on the subject, let's also talk about communism, about communism, about communism, about communism, about communism, about communism.
Whoa, wow.
No matter what we might think about communism in theory or how relevant we believe it is in today's world, one thing remains undeniable. Marx and his social and economic ideas continue to resonate with startling clarity. His insights from the 19th century still offer a timeless critique of exploitation and inequality, and they remain a critical lens through which we can examine the rigid system of power that persists today. Whether you see communism as a utopian dream or a cautionary tale, Marx's analysis of labor, alienation, and capital remains as relevant as ever in our ongoing struggle against a system that prioritizes profit over people. So, if nothing else, let his words remind us that questioning the status quo isn't just an academic exercise. It is a revolutionary act, one that could just spark the change we so desperately need. Please like, share, and subscribe because that will make my mother really proud.
The music dance experience is officially canceled.